Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
On a number of previous real side experiences I have shared, I have revealed how a certain number of those featuring and participating in them, in the various capacities that they are, take the decided form of standard 4-legged dogs, a fairly common anomaly where such body forms are not those prior to the formulation of the secondary personal self, that of animal body types directly animated by real awareness, but where the created self has been established, and these are simply the forms then such individuals choose to adopt. Generally, it is individuals on their respective awareness processes that have a tendency to operate as such, for indeed I myself have assumed 4-legged canine outer guises, especially where covert clandestine assignments were concerned, that my activities go undetected. A number of real side experiences shared by myself and others have revealed how many awareness becoming individuals also operate as large felines, lions, tigers, etc., including the guides, but what sets them apart is their exotic fur colorations. For it is so that on the real side we are only as limited as our held-to idea restrictions dictate, and this would include the body types, all of which are simply simulated vehicles for our awareness anyway. This real side experience would open up on a view where the participants were indeed a large group of individuals, numbering in the thousands, those that were taking the initial tentative steps into the real awareness, isness reality of themselves, stationed in a particular region or dimension of multi-dimensional creation, and where all of them were adopting the outer forms of 4-legged dogs. The general reason for such animal form assumption on the real side has never been completely disseminated, but as everything experienced is based on each individual's choice and intent, it is through that which is decided that dictates a simulated simulation and body form accordingly. Additionally, oftentimes the real side reveals individuals as they actually are at the moment according to their life choices, be they supportive of awareness or destructive, as we always are the effects of ourselves. This reflective principle, expressing in our creational positioning and body type consequently. And so it was that this large body of stepping up dogs were operating in a mutual awareness support of each other. Consciousness agreement facing and releasing would be part of the process, a consciousness overwhelmingly festooned with agreements to the dark force simulator controllers, as all consciousness constructs will be. The nature of such controller agreement would facilitate the means by which at any moment the dark forces can feature in the experiences of all and have the option to harm or eradicate, all according to the idea programming of consciousness, which effects always this agreed-to potentiality. The process of releasing attachment with the consciousness is a divorcing then of all idea agreements it comprises of, rendering the individual increasingly untouchable and beyond the ability of the controllers to adversely impact. For if I hold to no ideas, I can be the effect of nothing, others included, unless I consciously choose this to be. It follows, then, that a process of awareness just begun would have the individual with much by way of consciousness idea dissociation to process through. There will be present, then, all manner of idea agreements still retained in relation to the various expressions of the dark forces and their created ideas and systems, where there is greater vulnerability and susceptibility to the destructive whims of the simulator controllers and their ill-intended ilk. Expected then will be attacks in the preliminary stages of an individual's awareness process, as the dark forces take the opportunity that the idea agreements in relation to them as yet unreleased provide. That regardless of where in creation body forms may be placed, that they hold to the ideas of others always allows the potentiality of such others to feature in their experience. In essence, to maintain agreement with the dark forces renders an inability to ever be removed from their influx into our experiential presence. As though to hold to the idea of another, so we always retain a vehicle by which they can operate through, as the idea of them is part of our consciousness, which effects our simulated experience. This would be the situation for this community of dogs, as they would be made aware of expressions of the dark forces establishing themselves in their dimensional position with the intentions of eliminating them. Interestingly, the antagonists would take the forms of canines also, only they were more along the lines of dark and sinister-looking wolves, a relatively common form that the dark forces, especially the minions, those tasked with such objectives as eradication of others, may take, as revealed by myself and others on the real side. As I mentioned, form on the real side oftentimes reflects life choices, actions, and intent, and the various expressions of the dark forces operating in the awareness limiting capacities that they do, so their forms can express in accordance as representing regression from the standard two-legged form to those of animals. The reptilians very often will present as crocodiles and snakes as an example. I would be assigned seemingly the task of attempting to assist the plight of the dogs, targeted for destruction as they were, and would take the form of a four-legged dog myself. I had the sense of affiliation with the dogs, whatever their actual body forms and species may have been, and so this wouldn't be an undisclosed infiltration. I was accepted among them with the understanding that although I had very likely an alternative lifetime connection with them, I wasn't as a part of their number currently, but was welcomed among them, and they were agreeable to whatever aid I might afford. In reality, as the deciders of our experiences, only we can dictate what transpires and create the roles available that others may play within them. In essence, the controllers and those desiring to assist or intervene are bound by the parameters as set by the individual. We operate strictly according to the movie script they have established, in a sense. We are only able to capitalize on the ideas as present in their consciousness. In this case, ideas were in place where the dark wolves could eradicate them, and so this was rather a foregone conclusion as long as such ideas were held to. But idea agreements also were present where, although I couldn't prevent this, I could delay it if I could keep the dogs from the clutches of the wolves. Generally, then, we may present as potential rescuers, but rather must be accepted as such. The idea that we can intervene in the affairs of others positively must be decided and agreed to by those we seek to assist. As I said, I couldn't prevent the elimination of the dogs, but their eradication was dependent on the wolves' presence, and so I communicated my want to launch an exodus from their current location. We would communicate telepathically, and although a little reluctant, as they were rather settled into their dimensional position, they would agree, and I would lead them from their established creational spot. As I said, the outcome was dependent on what each respective dog decided, and despite my best efforts to relocate them elsewhere as we traversed dimensions, the dark wolves' pursuit would be relentless, and they would begin to eliminate the dogs one by one, thinning their numbers drastically until only a handful remained. It could be said that the survivors were those with the least agreements in relation to the controllers and their dark wolf assassins, or perhaps the ones that had been more focused where the facing and relinquishing of consciousness agreements was concerned. For now, the half-dozen or so remaining dogs expressed resignation with their predicament, as though throwing in the towel, so to speak, and accepting a fate that in reality they had decided by virtue of agreements they harboured. As everything is the effects of itself, destructive ideas, intent and inclination will themselves self-implode in reflective accordance, but first will play out creationally as they will. That such dark force assassins will meet the effects of themselves along the cause and effect creational road is a given, but in isness reality terms, everything is instantly its effect. An option then is to be the delivery mechanism of effects accrued by the dark force characters, but managed in such a way that alternative effects, that of displacement, can be utilized, removing the idea prior to the destruction that would have stemmed from it on the simulated creation side. This would be my decided course of action in an effort to at least save what remained of the dog community, and as the wolves closed in, manifested in the dimension we currently were in, a scene of simply swirling light with no other discernible feature would be a structure of a kind, one that represented and embodied the overall idea that were the dark force wolves. I would launch a tremendous fireball from my very body form, which would impact the structure, and on its obliteration, so the wolves would vanish from the scene, the impressions of my displacing them, removing the very ideas of them from creation. I was effectively the delivery mechanism for karma effects they had decided for themselves. The scene would fade at that moment. The remaining individuals in their dog forms were safe for the time being, but essential was it that they address any and all agreements that still facilitate effect the ability of the dark forces in all their expressions to impact their experience adversely. I would find myself now briefly on a large ocean-based vessel in the presence of an assortment of new friends, one I recognized being Jeremy. DUANE also was in attendance, and we were each presenting reports to him on our various assignments. I would be reading my accounts from a larger folder of recorded experiences, those that the personal self hadn't as yet been shown, and the details of which were obscured from my ability to bring back to the physical on waking. The scene would switch again, and I would find myself in the recreated house of my deceased grandfather, who would have been my mother's father. As I have mentioned on a previous real side experiences, this particular house will not represent my grandfather's consciousness, as is generally the real side symbology where recreated physical level houses are concerned, but a place where engaging and meetings with various body types take place, usually the guides, but not exclusively. On this occasion, I would be in the presence of a group of individuals that my personal self was unfamiliar with, and as I happened to glance out the window, so would a disc-shaped craft glide into view, the sight of it then obscured as it proceeded to pass over the house. This had a similar sense about it as with the real side experience I shared previously, where mechanical beings were taking over the earth and humanity, but prior to they making their presence known, so would an alien craft feature, one that wasn't affiliated with the mechanicals, and which represented a means of extraction for myself. A ship as a part of the alien Armada fleet, but with that particular human event scenario involving the mechanicals, where the alien Armada event then couldn't take place. So the new friends, and those on their awareness processes, had the option of extraction, courtesy of the Armada ships, relocated from an Earth that would descend into worse conditions of control under the tyranny of the mechanical beings that initially were posing as Earth's benefactors. As I said, in this current real side experience, so would another solitary ship be featuring, and the impressions were again that it was a part of the Armada fleet, and that it, along with others, was deployed for the purposes of new friend extraction. And so strong was this sense that I would be compelled to vacate the house and avail myself that my relocation from the earth be so. As the Armada fleet wasn't then featuring in the overall human experience, executing its ideal objective, that of making its presence known on a global scale, and where the various aliens and assorted body types would then accept humanity into what was an awareness becoming conglomeration of a species. Evidently this was again a variation on what may befall humanity, where the Armada was unable to carry out this optimum outcome, and instead be at least extracting those that had established intent with the All-Is. There will be all manner of idea agreements present in human overall consciousness, The alien Armada event will be among them, but present also will be innumerable dark force installed scenarios of adversity, depopulation events, global cataclysmic upheavals, and including other idea agreements such as the mechanical's takeover of the Earth that have nestled their way in by whatever consciousness installing mechanism allowed this to be. All these ideas are in effect now in reality, but only certain of them will be rolling out as physical level events. For the mechanics of consciousness dictate that ideas effect manifest in time sequences, as opposed to every idea effecting its nature now, as is in reality the case. The consciousness can be equated to a movie projector, where although all the movies are available and complete, only one of the completed films will be processing and rolling out on the screen that which is decided as most prominent over all others. All that we are shown on the real side are the potentialities, what may befall humanity, according to which idea is held in greatest prominence at any given moment, that which will then be processing through as being physical level manifested. But for the effect point, the movie's end, to be reached, the idea must be retained in prominence over all others to its conclusion, or it is the equivalent of switching movie reels on the projector before we have reached the film's end. What was unfolding now was a variation on the humanity scenario idea, where the Armada couldn't execute its ideal objective due to other limiting and detracting factors involved. In this case, it wouldn't be the inclusion of mechanical beings posing as beneficial, but with the objective of a takeover, as was the previous and most recent view regarding which idea agreement is being processed through as humanity's overall scenario, but instead a curious phenomena that was now manifesting in the skies above where I was standing, and which would be a global situation as impressions revealed. For a tremendous electromagnetic disturbance would be in effect, the skies are filled with varying nuances of colour, the sense of the very frequency foundation of the physical level Earth dimension being disrupted, and manifesting would be enormous spherical objects lacking solidity, comprising more of light, with the impressions of they being vehicles or vessels for a particular variety of body type alien that would never be revealed in the experience, but one that was highly technologically advanced. Impressions revealed no sense of malevolence or malice of intent. These alien beings had no inclination to cause harm, only that circumstances had dictated their motivation or means by which they now could feature in humanity's experience. However, the mechanism enabling their presence was adversely impacting the very dimension that was the physical level, as though tearing it asunder, but they seemed oblivious that they were causing such destruction, as though, from their perspective of view, they couldn't discern the extreme damage they were causing. This then revealed as to the necessity of new friend extraction, for these aliens, whatever they were intending to remain for whatever purpose they might have. And although they were somehow removed and exempt from the devastation they were causing, despite featuring on the physical and within their spherical light ships in the skies above every continent of the earth, they were literally disassembling the very frequency foundation of the physical dimension by virtue of their presence. How extensive, physical level-wise, was the damage they were causing wasn't revealed, but impressions suggested the Earth in the very least, and the immediate star systems around it would be decimated, the final result of which couldn't be predicted, and no further impressions would provide a clarification as to the exact particulars. The experience would end there, and as the most recent view in regards to humanity, so this presents as the current idea agreement in prominence, being processed to physical level actuality. But as I mentioned, for it to become a manifest, so must the idea causality be maintained to a conclusion. But the overall theme has recently switched to that of the Armada unable to execute its ideal objective, that of bringing the entirety of humanity into its awareness confederation, and more so extraction operations in a light of situations that prevent the Armada event from taking place. Planetary relocations due to conditions on the Earth no longer feasible for the continuation of the awareness process, for this most recent view would create a circumstance far less conducive for such, requiring a relocation from not just the Earth, but maybe even the entirety of the physical dimension that contains it.